Welcome to Still Plays Galaxy of Heroes. This is a talk video, and today we got the Great Mother's kit reveal, and she looks like an excellent character that we all are going to want to prioritize. Same deal here, developer insights and tips, breakdown and analysis of the kit, and then we'll be looking at the gear, and then some of the squad, some of the synergies that I think are worth highlighting. The Great Mothers arrive just in time to hopefully help ease some of those conquest feats. They are going to arrive as Night Sister support leaders. With them, they bring along a new elite marquee status, 2 new effects with blessed on allies and doomed on enemies, and they are the second large unit in Swugga after Jabba. Territory War Omicron, and they specifically highlight that it can take on JMKs, the doomed effects, protection and protection focused squads and mechanics. Blessed allies can target doomed enemies to get around taunts, and blessing attackers is advised in their wording here, but I don't think this is the true intent. It's advised because of the assists and offense. Those buffs are going to be built up, but Morgan Elsbeth will have meaningful viability with Blessed, and I think superior. Now for our kit breakdown and CG, thank you for finally fixing this so everything fits on screen. I don't know why that had to take over a year. The basic ability, Energy Threads, this is a Zeta ability. Special damage to the target. If the target was doomed, inflict tenacity down and they lose 20% max health stacking until the encounter end. It's unevadable and resistible. The tenacity down, that's about increasing the chances that vulnerable lands, and we want that. It's a key mechanic to both Great Mothers and Elspeth. Otherwise, if they don't have doomed, inflict ability block and speed down for 2 turns. That's adequate, but you're definitely going to want to prioritize going after the doomed opponent. Blessed allies, they gain foresight, and non-tank blessed allies gain stealth. This will come down to who gets blessed, but this has specific synergy with Morgan Elsbeth's unique, and it can't be understood without it. Under Morgan, any Night Sister ally who gains foresight gains stacking offense, and any Night Sister ally who gains stealth gains stacking crit damage. And what this is going to do is going to put foresight onto Morgan potentially, and so Bless spreads the mechanic from Morgan's unique onto Elsbeth if elected. And if applied to Spirit or Acolyte, it just makes them more dangerous because their specific triggers are happening more often, and it allows Spirit to stealth, so it's getting stacking offense and crit damage, and it's going to put Foresight onto Acolyte, so Acolyte is getting offense on top of the crit damage she was already getting from stealth. So it's making Elsbeth's unique mechanics function better and more consistently, or allowing at least that Foresight and offense mechanic to be added to Morgan. The special ability Magic Storm, this is a cooldown of 3 and it is a Zeta ability. If the enemy leader is light side, cleanse all Night Sister allies, mass dispel all enemy buffs, and doomed enemies are inflicted with vulnerable. Deal AoE special damage 3 times. If this attack defeats an enemy, all Night Sister allies gain defense penetration up. So a reminder to how vulnerable functions and how it's going to function with Elsbeth's mechanics. Any critical hit inflicts defense down, and when Elsbeth attacks an enemy with defense down, it triggers the weakest Night Sister ally to stealth, which feeds into the stacking crit damage mechanic from Elsbeth's unique. Since we are getting a guaranteed critical hit on vulnerable opponents, that stacking crit damage will quickly start to devastate those doomed enemies. So the mechanics mean we'll have to establish who is more important to receive vulnerable. Do we go with Acolyte or Spirit, who will do bigger damage to the doomed enemy? Or do we go with Elsbeth, who has far more synergy with the mechanics and will help stack the effects faster if she is blessed? The shorter version of that is vulnerable means defense down is going to be on that opponent, and we want Elsbeth to be the one who is hitting those defense down because that feeds into all of the broader mechanics. And if Elsbeth has that blessed, she can then hit that defense down. Unique ability to the old ways. This is an Omicron ability, and this is a big one. Night Sister allies gain 30% accuracy, max health, and tenacity, but can't be revived, and that effect persists through defeat. That's just to shut down Telzine squad mechanics. These stats will stack with additional health and tenacity from Elspeth's unique, and this in addition to other stats that Elspeth is providing. At the encounter start, whenever a attacker, Night Sister ally, or Great Mothers is critically hit, so anyone other than Elspeth, attacker, Night Sister allies gain foresight and stealth. So this won't apply when targeting Elspeth, but it means by going after anyone else, the mechanics are being triggered. That suggests shock and buff immunity may be important to countering this squad. Whenever an enemy is critically hit, Great Mothers and all blessed allies gain 1% offense stacking for 2 turns and recover 2% protection. That's doubled if they had vulnerable. So this protection recovery is in addition to all the recovery that happens from Elspeth's kit, and there's a good amount of it. But it's also another data point why I like Elspeth getting blessed. It means attacking doomed opponents will help Elspeth's recovery and survivability and take her as a tank to be tankier, and that's something that we're going to want. Whenever a vulnerable enemy starts its turn, all Night Sister allies gain foresight for 2 turns, and all non-tank Night Sister allies gain stealth. So we should try to spread vulnerable. That way the foresight and stealth mechanics in Elspeth's unique are triggered in as many conditions as possible. It just means more stacking offense and crit damage from the foresight and stealth triggers. Whenever a doomed enemy gains turn meter, blessed allies gain 25% turn meter. This is limit once per doomed enemy's turn. Suggests 2 things, like targeting an enemy who gains turn meter with doomed should be a priority, or choosing squads with turn meter mechanics, because that just means the Elspeth and Great Mother squad is going to be all the faster. It's also interesting they brought up JMK, because JMK shuts down turn meter gain mechanics, so it's just an interesting note. The Omicron, this is a territory war Ami. Whenever a vulnerable enemy is critically hit, Great Mothers and blessed allies gain 5% turn meter. The first time any other Night Sister ally is reduced to 1% health, they will self-cleanse debuffs, gain blessed for 2 turns if they didn't already have it, and damage immunity for 1 turn. Recover 100% health and protection and have their cooldowns reset. They are defeated when blessed is removed, and if they were already blessed, they have plus 200% health steal and gain 20% defense and offense, and this effect happens once per battle. So if you're doing territory war Omicrons, this is the one I would do first, because this is a 2 Ami character, because this is the one that really supercharges the squad. The leader ability, Threads of Destiny, this is an Omicron ability. It looks like there's a ton going on here. It's actually fairly straightforward. Night Sister allies gain 30% defense, max health, and 30 speed. So more stats stacking onto uniques. That's going to make Conquest a bit easier if you're using these lower star versions and lower gear versions of the squads. And this is what I was hoping to see. Stats and mechanics that elevated the squad so that they could punch up and make certain things that might seem like a pain, like defeat 30 something enemies with Elspeth, not a pain. Now everything else here, this just dictates how Fate Weaving, Doomed, Blessed, all those, and Gift of Shadows, how all of that is going to function, and it's laying out all the conditions and triggers to make sure that she functions as intended. If all allies are Night Sister at the battle start, at each encounter and each turn, if there are no enemies inflicted with Doomed, Great Mother's self-cleanse ability block gains the granted ability Fate Weaving and takes a bonus turn. During this bonus turn, Great Mothers can only use Fate Weaving. Great Mother can't use Fate Weaving 2 times in a row, and if the enemy leader is light side, dispel, steal, and ignore taunt effects when using Fate Weaving. So this all just means at the start of the battle, Great Mothers gets a bonus turn to apply Doom to someone immediately. And if you're going up against a light side opponent, you'll be able to do it to whomever you want. So everything else here are just conditions to facilitate this. And then the other condition is after each doomed enemy is defeated, because Doom goes away, you're going to get a bonus turn to reapply Doom to somebody. If all allies are Night Sisters at the battle start, then at the end of each turn, if there are no other allies with Blessed, Great Mothers removes ability block from themselves, gains the granted ability Gifts of Shadow and takes a bonus turn. During the bonus turn, they can only use Gift of Shadows, which is going to allow them to apply Blessed. And doomed enemies can always be targeted by blessed allies and Great Mothers. And this condition, it allows that immediately after that original bonus turn, when doomed is applied, we get to apply Blessed with a subsequent bonus turn. And whenever we lose an ally who has Blessed, we get another bonus turn and opportunity to immediately reapply it. With the ability Fate Weaving, the target enemy is inflicted with a stack of damage over time and doomed for the rest of the encounter. And what Doom does is protection is disabled and the character can't stealth. They're going to lose 20% max health whenever this character ends their turn until the encounter end and can't revive. Raid bosses and GLs will have minus 5% defense. Now, one of the things that I see here, particularly when we're looking at a mechanic like lose 20% max health, I think the Great Mothers are going to be a hard Jar Jar Binks counter. Because Boss Nass and the Gungans, they have functions that are converting health into a stacking protection mechanic. And all of this is going to be getting negated with how Doomed is going to function. You can also look at this squad as being a pretty strong Cadme counter. It's because you can just ignore the decoy, go after like Pow or Cadme, but Pow would be my choice. And you could just ignore the decoy, go after who you want, knock them out, and then after Pow is gone, the squad is basically neutralized. With our next granted ability, Gift of Shadows, target other Night Sister ally gains Blessed for the rest of the encounter or until defeated. Blessed, plus 20% max health and offense, immune to instant defeat effects, stun and turn meter reduction, and assist whenever another Night Sister ally uses a special ability, dealing 40% less damage. And now you can see, with an ability that makes you immune to an instant defeat effects, that would be particularly useful on a tank character like Morgan Elsbeth, for instance, because you wouldn't want to be exposed and out in the open. And if you can make her immune to instant defeat effects, that opens up the kinds of squads that you can bring this up against. It's why a JMK with Cat becomes an option. The last item, the Territory War Omicron. Night Sister allies gain 30% defense, max health, and 20 speed. Great Mothers gain instant defeat immunity while a blessed ally is active. Doomed enemies have minus 30% defense and offense, and whenever a doomed enemy is defeated, AoE inflict enemies with fear. This is nice Ami, there's more stats, that fear mechanic is interesting. This is really about the instant defeat immunity, which is going to be persistent since there won't be a moment where a blessed ally isn't active until only Great Mother is left standing. But I prefer the other unique Ami first because that just does way more. The other issue is there aren't that many characters that offer instant defeats. There might be more in the future, and maybe over time this Ami becomes more important, but this is very contingent on how you're using the squad and if you're going to be using them on offense against those squads that offer instant defeats. So if you're using this as like a dedicated JMK counter, then maybe, but maybe then your opponents just stop putting JMK onto defense. So then how valuable does this Omicron become? Because if you put it on defense, your opponents are just going to choose an appropriate counter where this doesn't really have an effect. So then you've spent an Ami on an instant defeat mechanic that isn't really going to occur too often. So then you're just really getting like fear, which is fine, but fear you can live with fear. In terms of the gear, this is a bit of a surprise. For this new status elite marquee kind of character, I was expecting some tough gearing, and this is not tough gearing. This is pretty easy gearing. Carb heavy character, you're going to want to budget for some carbs, but that's pretty easy with the raids these days. Like Gear 7, we don't even have HoloLenses. Not that those are a problem. We got a couple carbs and stun guns at Gear 8. We have our first Cairo set at Gear 9, a second Cairo set at Gear 10, but that's only 2 Cairos up to Gear 11, which means you're only dropping 100 of each Cairo to get Conquest ready, and hopefully getting some good mechanics. We'll be checking that out tomorrow, or today by the time you guys watch this. And then Gear 11, we have one more set of Cairos, but really nothing else that's meaningful. Pretty pretty easy character. Then at gear 12, we're looking at gears where we don't have like those fusion furnace. We do have a med pack, but only one. Then we have Nubian scanners, which are a little bit more common, but overall, this is pretty easy materials. It's not the highest of the demand ones. It's not low demand, but it's not the highest ones. And then we have the Cairo computer as the finisher, which is the less common and thus easier to acquire a decent amount of. So all in all, this is great news. It means we can get this character up and running pretty quickly. With our squad, this was always the assumed squad. We don't have a ton of options with the amount of Night Sisters that we have. Acolyte and Spirit clearly intended. It was always just about this final slot where Talia, the most valuable thing that she brings is a cleanse, a squad cleanse. But now, the Great Mother does bring a cleanse if you are going up against light side enemies under her first special. So Talia, because she does have a big cooldown on her cleanse, is going to give you an opportunity to stagger those abilities. But I did, during the Morgan Elsbeth video, highlight Initiate, not because I thought she'd be good, but just because I thought some of the mechanics were interesting and not useless. She does synergize with the squad. And it is because of her ability here, Cut Down, which gives crit chance up, because with Elsbeth, before we had Great Mother, you needed to have a critical hit before the defense down could land and thus get all of those defense down mechanics. But because the Great Mother, with how Doomed is functioning, is now providing a lot of vulnerability, so you don't need to wait for vulnerable to land on a character, you don't really need what Initiate offers. The functionality within Great Mother makes the like Initiate was more of like a first turn opportunity that just got the engine moving. That's kind of eliminated. So Talia, I think, just for the moment at least, is the clear-cut front runner. It's because it gives you two things. One, it gives you the ability to stagger some cleanses if that is going to be one of the mechanics that makes them more of a problem, like buff immunity and shock I had already highlighted are going to be important to shutting down the mechanics. If you can stop stealth and you're stopping foresight, that means you're stopping those stacking effects. So your opponent is incentivized to land shock and buff immunity. But what Talia does, it also opens up the possibility to bring the Great Mother up against dark side enemies, where the Great Mother is no longer able to provide the cleanse. Talia is now able to offer one. Talia is also just easier to gear. Initiate's actually, for an old character, a complete pain to gear. It's just, I'm done, essentially, with old gear, so I can afford to just take up a dumb character like that. But for players still working on things, you don't want to throw carbs and stun guns on Initiate. That wraps up this video, and I'm working on, I don't know, 2 more videos tonight. It's 11:51 p.m., and I'm drinking a coffee, because I need it. I hope you guys appreciate what I'm doing to myself right now to stay alert, to edit and record more videos, so that you can have some conquest stuff, a talk video, and even a roster video all tomorrow, and we'll see when I get some sleep. It's probably going to be a mess. So thank you for watching. Be excellent to each other, everybody. This is still Plays Galaxy of Heroes.